Bennett of Colorado coming out publicly last night and saying he doesn't think Joe Biden can win this election. He says Joe Biden's been a great president. He thinks he's one of the best presidents in modern American history, but just doesn't think he's the guy to do it. Do you believe that Joe Biden can defeat Donald Trump in November?
I do, and I am a co-chair of the campaign. I have spent quite a bit of time with the president over the last week or so. I can tell you that debate was a lousy performance. Every one of us knows it. There's unanimity on that one. But the fact of the matter is, the president is, I think, showing that he is up to this moment, up to the job, up to the rigors. I mean, speaking with NATO, he's touring the country. He'll be in Michigan this week. He's in it to win it. And I have been a longtime supporter of this president and vice president, and that's not changed.
Your state may well decide this presidential election. It's one of two or three that will. What are you hearing from voters in the 2 weeks since the debate? Obviously, they're concerned, but do you see them hoping for an alternative at this point?
Well, let's be clear. This is not fantasy football. We're not clearing the slate and everyone's picking who they think could be, potential candidates. We have a choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And any vote short of an affirmative vote for Joe Biden is a vote for Donald Trump. And I think we need to be very clear about this. This is a high-stakes election. And as I think about people in Michigan, I always think about, what is the person in the grocery store thinking about? Guess what? They're not thinking about the debate. They're thinking about how do they make sure that their children are set up for success? How do I ensure that when I drop my child off at school that they're not going to be a victim of a mass shooting? How do we make sure that they've got a clean environment and air to breathe? Climate change. I mean, there are a lot of different pieces, affordable housing that this president has receipts on that the other guy never did a damn thing about. And so that's why I think we're going to have to stay focused on what's really going on in America's lives. That's how we've always won in Michigan, and talk a little bit about that in the book. It's about showing up, meeting people where they're at, and fixing the fundamentals so that everyone has a real shot at success in this country.
Your name always comes up when people say, what would come next? If Joe Biden does, it's unlikely at this point, but if he does come to the conclusion that he can't win in November and he should step aside, your name and a handful of others always come up. If he does decide to step aside, a big if, the caveat there, is it a job you'd be interested in?
Listen, I'm not going down that road with you, Willie. I appreciate the question, but the field is set. Joe Biden is the only person who is determining whether or not he stays in this race. He's made his decision. He's communicated that decision, and it is time to get going. We've got a high-stakes election, and all this continued talk and fretting and hand-wringing that people are doing only sets us up for a disadvantage going into this important election against Donald Trump. You said it. Michigan is going to play a big role in this. It's going to be a close election. I've told everyone, don't celebrate a poll where we're up a few points. Don't commiserate when we're down a few points. Roll up your sleeves and let's do the work.
Governor, you just mentioned people at the grocery store, people at the gas station, people at just shopping. Governors are far more in touch with their constituencies than is the President of the United States, obviously. The President of the United States, unfortunately, has had whatever is going on with him diagnosed on TV by pundits, not the two doctors we just had on, by pundits every single night. What impact do you think that's had on average people who watch TV, don't think about the elections a lot, but watch TV and see people talking about, Jesus, President Biden senile, is he losing it, stuff like that? What impact has it had in Michigan?
Well, I don't think that it's had a huge impact yet, Mike. To be honest, people are good, hardworking people. They expect their government to be as good, if not better, than they are, and work as hard, if not harder, than they do. They are not able to consume all the information that we're able to, right? Because they're just trying to get through the day, get the food on the table, get to work on time, make sure their kids have what they need for camp right now or school in the fall. And I think that that's the daily concern that the average person has. So this kind of inside conversation that we're having, I'm not dismissing it. It's important, and I think there are legitimate questions that people have raised. I think the president is proving he's up to this moment. But the average person wants to know that this onshoring of manufacturing jobs is going to continue because it's meant good-paying jobs for Michiganders. They want to know that we'll still have someone in the White House who actually does something on infrastructure and rebuilds the damn roads. That's what we're doing in Michigan. So I think that's what the average person is thinking about. And that's why we've got to make the case to him. When this president delivers insulin at a much cheaper price, it's more money in your pocket to be able to deal with inflation and the high cost of eggs. One person can't control global inflation. But what we can do is have someone who cares about you, does things that put more money in your pockets, and make sure we got good paying jobs. And that's what Joe Biden has done.
Mika?
So, Governor, I want to ask you about your book. It actually applies very much to the situation that the campaign is dealing with today. I'll get to that in a moment. But I love it. Just reading it as a woman in politics, running for office as a woman, the focus on your physical appearance, all the different situations that you've been in, including life-threatening ones, on Trump focusing on you. And I want to ask you about something that you share in the book and you've talked about in your state that's deeply personal, but it really applies to some of the challenges that women are facing today in the age of Trump. Women who now don't have the freedom that we had for 50 years, the right to abortion health care, freedoms that our daughters don't have anymore because of former President Donald Trump. Here is you on December 11th, 2013, speaking on the Senate floor about being assaulted. Take a look.
So I'm about to tell you something that I've not shared with many people in my life. But over 20 years ago, I was a victim of rape. And thank God it didn't result in a pregnancy. Because I can't imagine going through what I went through and then having to consider what to do about an unwanted pregnancy from an attacker. And as a mother with 2 girls, the thought that they would ever go through something like I did keeps me up at night.
So you talk a lot more about this in the book, and Gretchen, Governor, can you tell us about why you felt it was really important to talk about this experience and what it means today? And if you could talk about the moment this country is in when it comes to access to abortion health care and the presidential campaign.
Well, it was really hard. Giving that speech was not something that I had planned to do, but the Republicans had decided not to let a single person testify about this bill that would have required everyone to pre-purchase coverage for abortion care, pre-planned for the unplanned event, which is ridiculous. And I decided to share my story. I talk about it in the book because some fights are worth having. Some fights are worth having because you know you can win them. That happened 10 years ago. I was incredibly demoralized after it. I lost the vote. But by the next morning, I'd heard from so many who had reached out to share that they too had lived through something similar to me, and they were thanking me for telling my story and doing the best that I could. 10 years later, as governor, I was in a position to sign the repeal of that bill. It took 10 years. It was a long, hard fight, but we won it. And so that's what this book is really all about, sharing some lessons I've learned in my life, giving people a little inspiration, or maybe you get a laugh at my expense, or maybe it's just some light reading in what is another heavy time. But abortion rights are very much on this ballot in November. Abortion rights are at risk. We know that 1 in 3 women in this country live in a state where they don't have basic fundamental ability to make their own decisions about their body or access the health care that they need. And so the next president will make more appointees to the Supreme Court. We'll decide whether or not to sign additional legislation to take away or make it harder to exercise the rights that we should be able to expect as American women.
You also write the harrowing account with your family. When you were attacked, people tried to kidnap you. I'll just read from it. It's just incredible. And it's important to remember that this actually happened. A crowd of people armed with semi-automatic weapons showed up at her home. Our security detail was there too, but they tend to stay out of sight. So when we first started hearing yelling, chanting, and music blaring outside, just my husband and I just looked at each other and we were like, what the hell? We peeked out a window and we saw a couple dozen people at the gate. And then we quickly closed the blinds again. We wanted to see what was happening, but didn't want to be seen. The only window where we could do that was a guest bathroom in the front of the house. So Mark, the girls, and I crowded into the bathroom with our dog. We peered out the window. We could see people with AR-15s, American flags, and MAGA signs. And there was a huge Trump float that had been appearing at rallies all over Michigan. Can you talk about that time in your life, not just for yourself, but for your family?
Yeah, well, you know, I think we all saw what happened on January 6th with our own two eyes, right? We saw it happen a lot earlier in Michigan. There was a gridlock demonstration. There's a picture in the book that I took from my office of someone saying half-wit, which is one of the slights that President Trump sent my way, is the reason we need the Second Amendment. That picture's in the book. I took it with my own camera feet away from where there were protesters with guns. They were outside of our house, and my girls came out and trying to figure out what on earth was going on, because we were all staying home to stay safe in the middle of COVID, and yet all of these threats continued. And each time that the former president came into or mentioned even the state of Michigan, we would see a measurable increase in the threats that I was receiving. I think it's important to share these stories because every one of us has dealt with a bully at one point or another. Every one of us makes a decision every day how we show up, who we engage with, who we talk to. And in the book I share, you know, at some point I'd like to even sit down with some of the men that were a part of the plot to kidnap and kill me, because I want to understand. People think that's really strange. Like, why would you want to do that? But, you know, I feel like the only way we can understand one another is if we're talking to each other. It's part of my governing philosophy. It's a part of how I've operated as a legislator and now as a governor. We've got to always seek to find common ground. It is really hard in these times, especially with the violent rhetoric that's become more normal. But good people of goodwill on all sides of the aisle got to recognize that and hopefully lead us back toward that moment. And that's, I think, what I'm trying to accomplish in this book.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.